Welcome everyone to Bounce Off, the number one SlamBall podcast worldwide, and today we are brought to you by the colour Cobalt Blue, which only makes sense if you're watching us on YouTube. If you're checking out the podcast in audio podcast form, thank you very much for being here. Thank you for being here on YouTube with us as well. My name is Sam Roberts. You can find me on social media at Quantum Roberts, Quantum Roberts. We talk all things SlamBall and various other whatnots, but you're here for the SlamBall stuff. This is a Q&A style pod with some other stuff sprinkled in. We will get into some questions in a little moment, but first I want to remind you that there's a bunch of content up on the channel right now. If you want to see my takes on last weekend, the first weekend of SlamBall action, you can see that on the feed right now. Or if you want to see interviews with Brendan Kirsch, head coach of the Mob, the only undefeated team in SlamBall, Darian Slade, who was originally fifth man for the Wrath, is now in a starting position due to injuries. We talked to him at the handler position. And Craig Skistimus, former SlamBall player, now turned big fan of the sport, who you can see the interview that dropped earlier today, where we talk about what it's like watching it and what legs the league has. We're going to talk questions today. I put out onto all socials and then also onto all the videos this week. Give me questions and I will try and answer them. Ones that are about the league, not ones about me, not ones about this show. Ones that are about the SlamBall League, and I'll do my best to try and get you an answer. Whether it's about the way the game's being played, if it's about the teams that are playing, if it's about the coaches, if it's about behind the scenes, if it's about whatever. And we've got a bunch of those today. We will get into them momentarily. Once we're done with this, we've got a short interview with Tony Feudo from OddsJam, who we spoke to last week, just for an update on how Vegas in the world of gambling is reacting to the first weekend of SlamBall stuff, his success in making picks thus far, and then also just talking as fans. I don't get a lot of time to do that on air. I'm either talking to people involved or obviously the interview with Craig earlier is talking to a fellow fan, but it's just nice getting to talk to someone really positively about what we've been able to see and get to nerd out about it. So there's some of that with Tony as well. And then we'll finish off the episode looking forward to tonight's games, sort of analysing the structure that the league's taken on and what we can expect tonight. That's everything that's happening today on Bounce Off. We start with questions, and we start with someone whose name you're going to hear a lot, which is at the Lava Squad on Instagram. Okay, you could have asked me on Instagram, you could ask me on Twitter, you could ask me on TikTok, you could ask me on the comments here, whatever. I would try and get an answer for you. And the Lava Squad is sent in a bunch on Instagram, so you'll hear their name a lot. I'm not going person by person with my answers here. I've sort of structured the questions as they make sense to come up. So you'll understand what I mean as we get into it. But the Lava Squad, one of their questions was, any insights on how SlamBall executives and owners saw the opening weekend? Positive? ? And I asked SlamBall this, I asked their PR team, and I got a variety of different answers. So first of all, they talked about attendance, and the crowds at the Cox Pavilion were great. Our friends at the Slamcast said, or they claimed at least that the first weekend was totally sold out tickets-wise. I think if you look at night one on the Friday, there were moments and spots where the crowd looked sparse. Don't know why that would be. I don't even know what the capacity for the Cox Pavilion is, but they were happy with the reaction from the crowd there. In terms of viewership, SlamBall hasn't released exact numbers, but it blew up on social media. They're very happy with Patrick, aka Admin, who's over there memeing it up and having a lot of fun with SlamBall. They're very happy with how it's taken off on social media. I think some of the clips have been doing particularly well. If you look at numbers for TikTok, you can either look at SlamBall specifically, or for example, Tony Crosby II is doing a lot of numbers on TikTok. You're seeing engagement over there, and that's always a good thing. And even though they're not going to release the numbers for night one, which was obviously on ESPN, the league is happy with the viewership they got given the competition for the night. I think it has gone under the radar and has been undervalued how big a night that was in American sports, because SlamBall was going up against, and this is one of those things that is unexpected when you're scheduling when SlamBall's starting, and it's always going to be hard to balance out. But they were going up against opening night of the World Cup, which that you could have worked out. The US women's national team was in action for the first time this World Cup season. So that was one of those things you could have countered against, and I don't know why they didn't. But then the other one was the debut of Messi in the MLS. So those are two very big soccer events. That's even if you're not a soccer fan, it's going to take some eyes away from what could have been on SlamBall. So they're happy with how that's turned out, but that's obviously something that's difficult to balance. So If the league's happy with it, good for them. They also gave me some insight in terms of gameplay. They think the level of play was high. I think especially we've obviously talked wildly about how good the Mob have been, but there's other teams that have been performing really well. A lot of highlight plays, like we said, that have ended up on social media. I think in particular Justin Holmes' spin, contact at the wall, spin, and then dunk, moving midair. That probably's got a lot of eyes on the league as well, which is good to see. A lot of high play, and a thing that the league is concerned on and wants to see more of is how close the games are. They only had 3 of the 12 games decided by single digits, and I think that there's a difficult imbalance there. What they've done with face-offs and introducing the idea of the bonus is a way of fundamentally doing what fouls are supposed to do, which is deterring teams from fouling and making teams play better defensively. That's the idea of the bonus that we've got in SlamBall. The first foul is a face-off. Everything after that gives automatic points and possession to the other team. And that's supposed to stop you fouling and play better defense. But what it also does is it can make scores jump up in a hurry. We saw teams like the Ozone, the Griffins, etc. Lose games because they gave away up to 9 points in the space of 20 seconds with poor defensive play. With the Griffins, they were really unlucky. They had a game that was within 5 and they misunderstood a rule. And they fouled twice and gave away 6 points immediately. So instead of it being a 5-point game, which would have been another close one from the league standards, it turned into an 11-point loss, and that doesn't look great. So they want it to be closer games. We'll see how teams figure each other out. We'll see if it gets more competitive or if just the gap's going to widen with this second weekend of play. The other thing the league's looking at is they want perimeter shooting to be better there. The league overall is 7 of 69, nice, from 4-point range. And I think that shooting is coming from the Lava and from the Rumble. Most other teams are only taking shots when it's late in the shot clock. The Buzzsaw have hit a couple. The Rumble's offensive strategy is predicated on distance shooting, so you would expect them to be taking a lot more. The problem is they're not hitting them. And I think the league wants there to be... If you've got a 4-point line, you want people to be hitting shots from the 4-point line. But from my perspective, it's... the Mob aren't scoring anything from outside the Tramps, and they're the most dominant team in the league. So 4 points would be great, and you do want to see more of it. But the slams are obviously a little bit more impressive because not everyone watching has the context for how far the 4-point line is. I also asked about ESPN and about executives' reaction and how the obviously the distributor of this league feels about things. And I was basically told that there's no exact word on what their aims are as a broadcaster. There's no ESPN aims that SlamBall's working with. They've not been told we need to do this, we need to do that. But when I asked about that, the league did say that their focus this weekend from a production standpoint is on educating the audience to the sport and to the background of the players. We've talked before about this league has got a lot going on behind the scenes in terms of filming for things like documentary series, and they've put some stuff out already on Trevor Anderson and Brian Bell Anderson, the relationship of father, son, and coach. And game 1 of the season had a little bit of background on the Mob and the Rumble. And I think timing is one of those things they're still getting to grips with, which is going to be should be a lot easier on ESPN Plus. But maybe then they don't want to spend as much time giving you the background. So it's really hard to find that balance in a brand new league. But they do have the assets there to make understanding the game and knowing the players a little bit easier from an audience perspective. I think it's tough to know what success looks like for this league. I think it's tough to know what they're looking for without knowing their internal ideology on it and without them releasing viewership stats. I would assume that they're looking to increase streaming numbers. I would think that for the league, for SlamBall, if they can drive interest online and drive viewership on ESPN Plus and drive subscription numbers for ESPN, that then gets rewarded with more opportunities for things like follow-up tournaments or for more spots on ESPN and ESPN2 and ESPN3 and all the live channels. A lot of people are more than willing to just say, well, it should be on, at minimum this should be on ESPN3 all the time. And it's like, well, that might ignore the company directive on what ESPN3 is for. And you want things like SlamBall that are hopefully going to have a niche audience, however you want to pronounce it, that draws people to the online space, to ESPN Plus. So is success higher streaming numbers, or is success higher engagement online? How good was the viewership when it was on TV? How good is the viewership going to be tonight? There's also the concern of there was no carryover on night one saying, okay, we've had 3 great games of action on ESPN. To see the rest, go to ESPN Plus tonight and over the weekend. That didn't happen. And so I think a lot of fans were just going, oh, that was SlamBall. I'll never get to see it again. And unless you're doing the crazy research like I am, people aren't going to find out when it's on. And ESPN and commentary and the league needs to do a much better job of communicating where you can find this. Tonight, obviously, tonight's games are all ESPN2. And then the rest of the weekend is on Plus, I believe. So tonight, ideally, there's going to be a lot more. Go to ESPN Plus. Watch all of this past weekend's games on ESPN Plus. Do you want to see how dominant the Mob have been? Go to ESPN Plus. Get your subscription started today. First month free. Whatever it is, they need to be doing that. Like I mentioned briefly there, I think also social media engagement is that a big thing for the league that is touting the idea that they would have done a lot better back in the day if Twitter had existed. So are social media and interactive numbers a big thing for this league? Is that a focus? At Papa_A Smith on Twitter was asking, is the commentating team going to be rotating, or do we get a set team? I saw they are bringing in a few new people for the season. On this particular topic, I didn't get enough opportunity to ask the league about this. So what I'm about to say is going to be total speculation. But I think they'll swap in and out week to week, with the exception being John Schriffen, who's going to be there as the play-by-play guy throughout the entire season, right? I get the feeling that the league has thrown together things like commentary a little bit last minute. Not that they're not thinking about it. I think there's a lot of thought going into who's being brought in. I just think that there are opportunities that you could have had certain people stick around more than others. For example, LaMonica Garrett, who was there for weekend one, who is currently an actor, but is formerly the I believe, highest scoring player all time in SlamBall. He really wants to be back this second weekend, but his schedule is chock full of stuff for the middle of the summer. So he's just not available. If he was available, he'd be like, please put me on TV. And I think he was really good in that role of explaining the game from a former player's standpoint, but also someone who's seeing the game a little bit better than John Schriffen or even Nate Robinson, who was on the call. With Nate Robinson, that brings me to the idea that even back in the day, SlamBall had people like Sean Marion and at that point in time, like active pro NFL guys would be on commentary week to week, right? When they were when they were shooting in Florida, and that's because, as Craig Skistimus put it in our interview earlier, those guys play the average fan who doesn't know as much about this sport. So they're going, "Whoa, that was awesome! Why was that a foul?" And it's up to play-by-play, or realistically, it was up to LaMonica Garrett to explain those things, and that's to explain to the audience at home, right? So they play an important role, because not everyone's an expert of this thing. And there are people at home who are going, why did that happen? What's going on with the scoring? Why is it 3 points for dunk? And so you need people like Nate Robinson and this weekend John Dorenbos, who is a former NFL player. You need these guys to be asking those questions. The other element of that is that these guys have a personal audience from being former pro athletes. And so when they tweet out, catch SlamBall this weekend, I'm going to be live on commentary for all 4 days, that makes people go, oh, I didn't know SlamBall was back. Or, oh, what is SlamBall? I've never heard of that. This guy's doing commentary. Let me check out what it is. And that's a way of growing your audience in a slightly more organic way by having these guys rotate in and out. And also because if they're people who aren't super invested, like I think there was a certain element. Nate Robinson was great weekend one, but you could tell he was getting a little bit tired by the end of it. And they also have a tendency to say things that will go against company line, which is like, oh, they should be shooting all the threes. And it's like, right, but that's not necessarily a good strategy. So the real reason that you've got people swapping in and out with a former athletic background is because they're seen as more legitimate sportsmen and athletes than anyone playing SlamBall. They can ask the questions that the general audience is asking, and they bring an audience themselves that you wouldn't be getting unless they were tweeting out, hey, I'm going to be on SlamBall this weekend commentating, right? There's also a cost attached to things like that, so I don't know what the rates for these guys are. I don't know if they've got contracts with ESPN. But if you look at the social media engagement SlamBall was getting, people like Patrick Mahomes in the NFL, former NFL player, now big media name Pat McAfee, these guys are interested and are watching the league. they're not being brought in to do commentary. And that's because I would guess that their pay packet is way higher than SlamBall or ESPN is willing to pay to have them come in and do 4 days worth of commentary. And it can't just be for the love of the game. Like, there's the argument maybe LaMonica Garrett would do it for free or just for like transport. Again, I'm just saying that's just a thing I'm throwing out there. But maybe he'd be willing to do that because he's got a relationship with the game and he's willing to do this to help it grow, much like the coaches that we're seeing and all the former players. But Pat McAfee doesn't have that. He needs to get paid. So there's a cost attached to who you bring in. So you need to choose wisely who's going to bring an audience. Like I said, there's also like a credibility element that needs to be met with the commentary team. John Schriffen, as a guy who's going to be there week to week, he's going to get better at the play-by-play, and he's done a lot of these alternative sports for ESPN. He's their main guy with XFL, for example. So there's a lot of that comes from him, but he's not yet comfortable enough in the role of play-by-play for SlamBall that it's coming across as an authoritative, I know what I'm talking about guy. He is really good. He's really, really good at keeping the energy up and stuff. It's just he needs more practice. But credibility also comes from the additional people you're bringing on. We talked about LaMonica Garrett as former SlamBall player, someone who can communicate strategy and skill, and someone who wants to be there. This week they're bringing on Stormy Buonantony, who is also an ESPN sideline reporter, analyst, and commentary personality. And I think that she's being brought in. Each week you're going to see John Schriffen, and then someone that's going to bring credibility from a broadcasting standpoint, and then someone that's going to bring credibility from a real sports, historic sports element, right? I don't know if that's going to always be basketball and football. Maybe next week we get an ice hockey player. That would be interesting. But you do need that balance. So John Schriffen, I think week to week we do not know, but it's always going to be John Schriffen. It's always going to be a former athlete, and it's always going to be someone that lends credibility from the broadcast position or from the SlamBall position, right? And LG did that. And hopefully Stormy Buonantony will do the same. Hopefully we see LG back. I think they maybe want to make it fresh every week so that you're constantly getting those new eyes. But he was excellent, and I hope to see him again soon. At Henry Zimenoff on Twitter asks, should they need coaches' challenges in the league to avoid more controversy after the Buzzsaw versus Griffins game? First off, if you listened to my my daily episode after that matchup, and I talked about it earlier on, they misunderstood the rule. So in SlamBall, you get the first foul of each quarter for each team results in what's called a face-off, for anyone who's not heard this yet. A face-off is one defender, the person who makes the foul, versus one offensive player, the person who gets fouled, one-on-one at the basket, okay? Regardless of what happens, the offensive team then gets possession of the ball back. You get one of those per quarter, and then after that, every subsequent foul, you're in the bonus, where the offensive team just gets 2 points plus possession. Eventually, it's 3 points plus possession, depending on how many fouls you give away. The exception to this rule is called the make it, take it, or make it, break it rule, which is, in the last 20 seconds of a game, if you foul, it goes to a face-off, the clock is stopped, the face-off happens, but the offense doesn't automatically get possession. They need to score to get possession back, right? That's the last 20 seconds of the game, and we saw that used effectively to try and make a comeback by the Lava earlier in the weekend. With the Griffins Buzzsaw game, the problem is commentary misunderstood the rule, and as a result, the audience has misunderstood the rule. Commentary was saying it's the last minute of the game. If the Griffins foul, they will cause a make it, take it. It's not the last minute, it's the last 20 seconds. The reason they were then given credence for this is because the Griffins kept fouling in that last minute because they thought it was make it, take it time. So this is fault of, there's an issue with rule communication to commentary. There's an issue with, and then there's an issue with the Griffins coaching staff not communicating to the players. Stop fouling! You're just giving them 3 points each time plus possession, right? So that's where the issue with that came in. The reality is, commentary needs to know the rules better, and the Griffins players and coaches need to know more about the rules as well, right? There's no controversy with that end game. The controversy is the Griffins don't know enough about the sport they're playing. That's the honest truth, right? That's what gave up that game to them, where they were only down by 5 points. Good defense would have won them that game. And guess what? They let in the least amount of points at the rim of any team, so they could have maybe taken that one if they'd not messed it up with poor decision making. Do coaches need a challenge? This is something that's come up in the NBA because games can be decided by bad refereeing calls. And so coaches get what's called their coaches challenge. I believe in the NBA you get one each half per coach. Actually, no, it's one per game per coach. And you can say, I want to challenge this. All of play stops. The referees go to a monitor. They analyze what just happened. And they can change the ruling on the floor because it's such a fast-paced game and things can happen at the turn of a dime. Does SlamBall need that? Short answer, no. Long answer, it's week 1. And I've not seen enough poor refereeing outside of incidental whistle blows because they are... because the referees are a bit nervous trying to make sure they get everything right. I've not seen enough poor refereeing to justify the idea of introducing a challenge rule in SlamBall. The thing that's pointed out by people like Coach Berkoff on Twitter, who's one of the people who's most active talking about this thing, is the biggest rule breaks are things like the mob might be getting away with 3 seconds on the island, which should be a turnover. But if that's happening multiple times a game, if you get one challenge per game, you're not going to waste it on a 3-second rule. You're going to waste it on a much bigger play, right? But those 3-second rules add up. So if that's the only big concern, a challenge wouldn't change that. Better refereeing would change that, and following the rules would change that. Other than that, I just don't think we're at a stage where a challenge is warranted. Never mind need it. Maybe you'd argue it's needed. I don't think it's warranted, and there's a difference between those things. The refereeing isn't so bad that they're altering the state of games dramatically on 1 or 2 calls. I think after season 1, or this is summer season 6, right? After this first tournament or season, however we're going to refer to it in the lexicon, after this we can have another look at it. I would even say after, if they do end up doing 4 tournaments a year, I would say give it a year. And then we can start maybe trying to change the rules, because the rule book was partially changed from now versus even like 3 months or like 3 weeks ago when training was still going on. They changed some of the things. And it's changed dramatically since 2016 when they were last playing this sport. So I think give refereeing time to catch up. And I think then we can talk about that. On refereeing, at the Lava Squad on Instagram asked, what insights can you share on the refereeing structure within the league? Is there a head of officiating? Are refs getting graded or tested on the rules? Seems to be a lot of confusion on their end with some of the rules too. Like I say, I think the biggest issue with rules is communicating that to commentary and John Schriffen not knowing enough, because he's a busy guy. This is the credit to him. He is a busy guy doing lots of sports, and this is a new one that he does not have time, like me, to pore over the rule book for, okay? But that's the issue with refereeing. The referees have made some poor calls, and it's them catching up to this thing themselves, and just getting better. They need to get the reps in as well, and so that's still happening. What can I share about the structure? Well, I can tell you that there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 different referees in the league, so there's a referee squad. That's funny. Head referee is Marcus Reed, who's a former SlamBall player for the Steel, Riders, and Mob. Underneath him, in terms of coaching, we've got Marcel Martin, Tammy Holman, Melanie Brown, Ray Bullock Sr., Ray Bullock Jr., and Ellis Coleman. I'm told by PR that there are going to be referee profiles going out at some point soon. So if you want to know about the backgrounds of everyone involved refereeing-wise, those will be out and about. Each game has a crew chief, but that changes game to game, as it would with any sport. And in terms of are they being graded, that feels like unrealistic to give each referee an individual grade. What does feel realistic is what they're doing. So according to PR, this does, in reading it, sound a little bit of an exaggeration how they've phrased it. But they've said that referees sit down on non-game days with Rob Wilson, who is a former player. He's an executive vice president of SlamBall, and he's in charge of competition and player relations. This guy is someone that everyone speaks about because he's the communications guy involved in SlamBall, right? So what PR has told me is that the referees are sitting down with Rob every non-game day, and they're watching 4 to 5 hours worth of film, right? That seems unrealistic. From a number of reasons. Like, first of all, I think that they are doing something equivalent to that. I think they are spending 4 or 5 hours a day addressing refereeing concerns and trying to get better. I don't think Rob Wilson is there for the whole time. He's too busy to be hand-holding referees for 5 hours. Not that they need it. They're adults that will be taking this job seriously. But he's just not available for that. nor is there 4 to 5 hours daily worth of footage to go over, at least in the public eye. I would assume SlamBall's got way more footage behind the scenes, and so they're probably looking at that. But again, this sport is also different from how it was 7 years ago, never mind 20 years ago. So they'll be addressing it, and I think this week we'll hopefully see a tighter ship. And even if we don't, that's only 2 weeks into the 5-week season. We've got 3 more weeks to see how they develop. Hopefully we've got even more weeks to come if there's future tournaments and seasons. The Lava Squad, again on Instagram. Just for reference, pretty much most of the SlamBall teams now have a team page on Instagram. The Lava Squad is not one of them. This is a fan account, but they're doing great work as well of spreading the game. And anyone who's interested in SlamBall, I love you guys. Thank you so much for being a part of our weird little community of people who love this niche sport. But the Lava Squad was asking, any idea on average player pay and benefits? So in terms of benefits, we'll start with that. Players say they get everything paid for. What that is specifically, I don't know. But I think it would make sense to say definitely housing. Obviously, the league has sorted out housing for all the players. And I would assume things like the rehabilitation centres that they're going to, obviously anything to do with like training is provided for them. And then it also comes down to equipment. So I believe that all the health and safety stuff is supplied for them. What I meant to check up on is that Cam Horton told me that Brendan Kirsch and the mob, like the coaching staff there, supplied their team with the highest quality of ankle braces. Which, is that because they didn't like the ones that the league was giving out? Or is it that the league isn't in charge of giving out all of the protective gear that they're requiring players to wear? Are they getting players to purchase for that on their own dime? I would assume it's not that way. I'd assume the league is giving them stuff and maybe Cam's misunderstood where the equipment's come from, or Cam is correct and the mob coaching staff have gone and bought their team better equipment, which wouldn't be like against the rules or anything. It's just keeping their players safer than maybe some of the other players are if the league's not supplying them top of the line stuff. In terms of pay, we don't have numbers. And as much as I'm willing to ask the league certain questions, I know the things that they will and the things that they won't address with me. And one of those is numbers. If they're not going to give me the viewership numbers for weekend 1, they're definitely not going to tell me how much money the highest paid player is getting paid, right? What I can tell you is that coming from a number, what I can assume is it's not in the millions, right? It is not millions of dollars. The league overall got an initial investment of $11 million. They do not have $11 million to pay players with, right? They have $11 million to run the whole league with, plus whatever else they're getting from ESPN, plus any partnerships, plus if there's been secondary rounds of investment since then. Regardless, it is not enough that these players are getting paid, I would guess maybe 6 figures, but I highly, highly, highly doubt anyone's even on like the 100,000s, right? Especially at least players. But it is comfortable, right? It's comfortable enough that it's one thing for players who are maybe in dead-end jobs, who aren't doing anything or whatever, who are like, okay, I'm going to come and take this opportunity. It's different when you have guys like Bryce Moraine who were in like corporate America jobs that were paying them a reasonable amount to drop that opportunity to come and play SlamBall Pro, which shows that the pay packet is nice. It's nice enough that players jokingly are like, oh, it's comfortable. It's comfortable. So it's good. It is good money. It's just nowhere near NBA, NFL, NH. It's probably not even like 0.1%, but it's still comfortable, right? And that's a good thing that's a good thing to encourage players to stick around, because love of the game's great, but you need longevity, and longevity is bought, right? When it comes to structure of pay, this we do have some answers from. Coming out of interviews again with guys like Toxic Takes, with guys like the Slamcasts, who are all doing great work. We know that it's a tiered system when it comes to pay. Coach Hernando said it was based on draft order. Coach Kirsch has clarified that it likely is, but it's not definitive in that sense. So Coach Kirsch surmised that there are 3 players who receive a set amount, right? So there's a level 1, level 2, level 3 player, which are going to be your 3-star players, most likely are the guys that you think you want to keep around long term, and they're going to get a level 1, level 2, level 3 pay. And then after that, everyone else is going to be on the same wage, right? And that might have been decided by draft order. So if you're looking at teams, you might be looking at the rounds and going, right, so everyone in round 1 got like banned 1, everyone in round 2 got banned 2, everyone in round 3 got banned 3, which would suck when you're on the snake style, because if you're, or would suck for whoever gets drafted first in the second round. But I don't think it's that way. I think that coaches will have made a decision after a little while on who's getting what money, depending on how important they are to their team. And that's coaches' discretion, I believe. So we don't have numbers, but we do have structure, and we do have an understanding that it's nowhere near like other pro leagues, but it's comfortable enough that these guys are willing to sacrifice their bodies to stay there. One thing I didn't check up on, and that I'd like to ask the league about, and will do, I think, in the coming days, is what the benefit is to winning the championship for players. There's been a lot of talk in pro basketball at the moment with the introduction of the NBA's like in-season tournament of why should players play for that. And well, the answer is there's a cash prize associated with winning. You'd assume there's like bonus incentives involved with winning like the league here. But that's not being put out there. I will ask because I would like to know. So sometimes the cues come from me and the answers come from the league. Sometimes it's, I'm asking, I'm giving you the A's. At Papa_A Smith on Twitter asked, aside from main event wins, what is the tiebreaker for the standings? So we have been told that, I guess the assumption is that wins or win percentage, I think those two things are probably flippable, is going to determine seeding, right? 1 through 8, we talked in terms of playoffs, the top 2 teams get a bye, the bottom 2 teams say goodbye, they get kicked out, and then 3 plays 6, 4 plays 5, for the right to play 1 and 2, right? And the question was, what's the tiebreaker situation? Well, the answer was main event wins, right? So if you have teams who have maybe you've got a team who, for example, a team who has won on a Saturday and won on a Sunday, but lost both of the main event matchups, they'd have 2 wins, 2 losses. And then say you have a team who has played on the Thursday and then won the main event, and then lost 2 other games that weekend. That's also like, or lost an extra game that weekend. That's also like a 2-2 split, right? So both those teams have got 2 wins, 2 losses. The team that's got the win in a main event slot, they get priority. They get the tie break in that situation. The question on everyone's mind, or in some people's mind that need more data and details, is what is the follow-up tiebreaker after that? The assumption on my part is score differential. Your points for versus points against per game, the difference in that, which right now the Mob are running away with at 116 points differentiated. Next best is both the Wrath and the Buzz, who are at 30, and then everything else is in the minus, right? So I would guess that it's based on your point differential. But the league standings page doesn't reflect that assumption. The standing page reflects, right after week 1, it reflects wins, and then after that it's muddled. It's not even alphabetized, right? So if you look at the teams that have got 0 wins and 2 losses in the Griffins, the Lava, and the Rumble, by anyone's estimate, the Rumble have been the worst team in the league. They have the worst differential in terms of points. The Lava are at -8, the Rumble are at like -40 something. But on the league standings, out of those 3 teams, the Rumble is highest, right? And there's no stat to back up why that is. So could it just be oversight? Could it just be they're not thinking about these things right now? I would hope that they're thinking deeply about how you break up things like that and it doesn't just turn to a coin toss. But it also seems unlikely we'll need to worry about that. If main events are what they're going by, we'll stick with that, and then after we'll get into point percentage and differential. I do have the PR team chasing that up for me though, so we're awaiting an information on that. Again, I'm assuming it's point differential because the Mob are running up their score in every game. Their second game against the Slashers this weekend, they didn't take their foot off the pedal, even though they were up by like 30. They continue to try and run up the score. And I think that's because if for some weird reason, say Gage Smith snaps an arm touch wood, hopefully not going to happen, right? And the mobs start to go on a losing streak. A big point differential earlier in the season gives them a nice cushion for later in the season. So I would assume point differential is the answer to that question. At the Lava Squad, welcome back. On Instagram, they ask, is it technically possible to draw popcorn calls by having all offensive players, forward players, stand in the tramps, thus preventing defensive players from jumping in as well? So if you don't know what a popcorn call is, popcorning is a rule where if an offensive player goes into the trampolines, a defensive player can't intentionally jump on the same trampoline to try and disrupt their bounce, right? It's different in the stoppers box because they have like positioning rules about being able to be there. But if you like follow someone into the tramp and disrupt their bounce, that's popcorning. And that's not allowed because it can be dangerous, but also it just ruins the fun. That's kind of thing. So it's about following players into the tramp after they've made an initial movement, right? One thing you'll notice about a SlamBall defense, first of all, is that outside of the stopper, there are very few defenders in the tramps as it is because it can lead to popcorning, because you're not allowed to make contact in the air, so there's no point in doing it. Because if you foul someone too close to the tramps anyway and they make a leap in there, it's a face-off or it's bonus points. And so you find it's very unlikely to have anyone other than the stopper defensively be in the tramps. And that's why movement inside the tramps is really difficult for a stopper to deal with because they're on their own there. Okay. Once an offensive player has made it in, it's basically up to the stopper because defensive guys have so little opportunity and stuff they can do to stop an offensive player. The thing is, the suggestion by Lava Squad is actually impossible based on the rules. Okay. So within SlamBall, and this is directly from the rulebook, this is the quote, an offensive player without the ball is allowed only one bounce in and out of a spring bed. So that's each individual tramp, right? You can jump in to one spring bed and then jump from that spring bed to a different spring bed, or jump from that spring bed out of the springs entirely, or jump onto the island, but you cannot consistently stay in the same spring. Okay? And that sort of counts for landing as well, I guess. So you cannot just bounce. You cannot just stay in the same spring. You need to move around. So this just is technically not possible to do from an offensive standpoint. But I thought I would take this as an opportunity to try and explain a little bit about how popcorning works and why the defense is structured in a way that most defenders are outside of the tramps, because they basically can't do anything unless you're in the stopper position inside the tramps. And even at that, unless you're in the stopper's box, unless you're in that bottom tramp, you can't like try and make a play on the ball either, because you need to be going straight up and down, right? You can't jump into the guy, you can't go sideways. And that's what the little scuffle between Brendan Kirsch and Bradley Laubacher in the second game between Mob and Slashes the weekend, that's where that came from, because Brad jumped forward on a face-off, and that's just a dangerous play. And so that's not part of the league either. So that's just a little bit of defensive. To answer the Lava's question, no, you wouldn't be able to do that because the offense would need to move from tramp to tramp and do it in such a perfectly executed way so that there's not two people on the island or two people in the one tramp at any one time. And orchestrating that's just incredibly hard in the middle of a full offense. And you'd need to like rush up there super fast. You'd need to take out your stopper. There's just a lot of logistical issues that it wouldn't work even if the rules allowed it. After Dark Miko on Twitter asks, how does SlamBall advance from fun sideshow to legit sport? And I think there are 4 things I'll address with this. First of all is analysis and punditry, right? If you look at any major sport, and this is why I've started Bounce Off and why I'm talking so much about this game and why I'm analysing it to the level I am. If you look at any major sport at any level, whether it's a major sport like soccer, football, or basketball or football or American football or hockey or whatever, or something minor like the beanbag tossing one, cornhole, which I am a big fan of watching cornhole. Whenever I see highlights or whatever, I'll watch it because I like weird sports. These things are developed by capturing an average fan and making it accessible and understandable for them, right? And then once they're in it, giving them an opportunity to debate with someone on TV about what's good and bad. And in order to do that, you need people who represent the sport as analysts and as pundits who are talking about it as a job and are talking about it from the perspective of, here are my thoughts and here's how it can open up your view of the game. Because I'm seeing this, and now you can go to the barbershop, or you can go to the bar, or you can go to the park, and you can talk to your friends about this thing that, oh, Shaq said this on Inside the NBA. Oh, Charles said this. Oh, whoever it is said whatever it was. And you can either just say they said it, or you can parrot it as your own thing. But regardless, punditry and analysis to make the game, A, more understandable, and B, more legitimate by talking about the plays and talking about how it's structured and how things work, that translates into real sport feel. The NBA has got 100 shows about it. The NFL, the NHL have got 100 shows about it, right? Professional basketball in the UK has a level of television presence about it, right? SlamBall currently has the broadcast, and that is it. They have the broadcast, and then they have me, they have the Slamcasters, they have Toxic Takes. They have other podcasts who do bits and pieces talking about it. They do not have an after show. They do not have a let's be critical of what we're viewing and let's talk about it as fans or as media. And that's one of those things that advances it and legitimizes it as this is something that's more than just highlights. And you need someone to do that. And LaMonica Garrett was doing that. But what you also need is more care in doing it. Okay? You cannot rush the explanation because people will not register what they're being told. And you cannot have it be a 3-second bit from LaMonica on why this is a rule and why this isn't a rule or what happened, because then fans are like, well, I didn't fully understand that and I'm going to have to go away. Right? You cannot have it be that way that, again, talking about taking care and talking about the rules and commentary, you need people to be able to understand what's going on because you need the commentary to be able to communicate what's going on. And so care needs to be taken to educate people on this. And I think the league wants to do that. We just talked earlier about their goals for this weekend is to educate people better. The thing is, you could do this with a 3-minute video. And they did do it 15 years ago on their YouTube channel. Recreate that video for the modern day, pin it on your YouTube channel, pin it on your Twitter, send it to the admin of the Twitter account. Because the way this gets legitimized as a sport is that it's taken seriously as a sport. You grow an average fan base who can talk about it and who want to watch it and are interested in learning more. And you explain to them and to anybody new how it works, and then you treat it legitimately, right? I think we talked about Patrick, the Twitter admin, and they're doing a great job of being fun and engaging and getting people on Twitter to talk about SlamBall. What they're not doing well with is treating it like a real sport. And that's a balancing act, because it's all fun and games to go, I'm just the admin, I don't know the rules. You are running the social media account for a brand new sport. Yes, you're right, no one knows the rules. But if no one knows the rules, including the sport itself, which is what's being projected out there by your social media, because you haven't explained anything on social media yet, if that's what you're putting out, then who's going to care about the rules? And then who's going to care about the sport? All they're going to care about is the highlights, because they don't understand the framework with which the highlights are taking place in. Right. So in order for it to be a legitimate sport, it needs to be presented as a legitimate sport. And that includes going as slow as your slowest man and explaining things for people and structuring the presentation in a way that you can do that. I get it, it's a rush. I get it, there's a time crunch. I get it, that was week 1 and it's hard. But you've got to take the time, the care, and the attention to make sure that that explanation is coming through. Whether it be in pre-made packages, or whether it be on commentary, or whether it be in the gaps in between games, right? And that's difficult when ESPN's also trying to run a business and you've got ads to sell. Okay. On ESPN, I think there needs to be more support from the network to the league as well. I think that there was no carryover, we talked about that earlier, no carryover from ESPN to Plus on Friday. There's seemingly nothing on the ESPN site in terms of like a section tracking what's going on. There's no statistical data being provided to the audience. Again, in my description down below, you can see some statistical data that the league is putting out there, but you need to find that. You need me to tell people that that's a thing, because otherwise the league's not broadcast that. And that's not me giving you something that's only accessible to media. I asked, it's for public consumption. They've not told anyone where to find it because they want to wait until it's shiny and their thing and not just admit, look, here's the admission, it's a third-party site right now. We're working on our own thing. Just be honest about that. Just be honest about that and say, it's third-party right now. We're working on our own thing, but we're developing all the time. Here's the details you want about the game, and we'll explain what that means in context. And they're not doing that. And ESPN's not helping with that. ESPN needs to do a little bit better job promoting on socials. Actually, that's not true. They're doing a good job of that. They are doing a good job of that. Again, I think that the promotion to the casual fan is going really well. I don't know the numbers for that, but I would assume that it's going really well. From a SlamBall's socials and then ESPN picking and choosing what they want to put out there, just to remind people that, like, yeah, it's back. Or to let people know, by the way, this is a sport you can watch. Because some people are still going, holy shit, I've never heard of this. This looks cool. I'm going to jump in. Where can I watch it? And then there's no follow-up on where can you watch it. And there's no, like, you know, there's a couple of things that are holding them back. Them legitimizing themselves is one of them. And that's a hard balancing act when you're also trying to be a fun social media, like, presented thing. It's a high wire balancing act. A thing I want to harp on is honesty and transparency. We talked about that with the with the stats and with the fun, quirky, I don't know the rules Twitter. But you need to be able to educate people at a certain point on what the rules are, because commentary can't do that right now. And one of the two has to do it. If commentary can't say, here are the rules right now, if commentary's getting rules wrong, Twitter has to go, here's a correction on what they've got wrong about this thing for anyone curious, right? That needs to happen. And they're juggling a lot, because this is realistically for an entire sports league. I'm assuming it's a small team. I think it might just be the admin and maybe people pulling clips. I don't know that for sure. But given that the only person that's being talked about is Patrick, I'd assume it's all up to him, and that's a hard thing to do. Give me the login details and I'll answer all the questions. Screw it. If you don't know the answers, again, I offered you the rulebook. So those are my things. Analysis and punditry has to be taken seriously. That's why people like me exist, because that's what I want to be doing for this thing. If you've got friends who are like, I want to get into SlamBall, but there's no one talking about what's good or bad, send them to me, send them to Bounce Off, because that's what I'm loving doing, right? There's no analysis and punditry, and the only analysis and punditry there is totally removed from the league, and me, and Coach Berikoff, and Craig Skistimis, is people who are doing it because they love the sport, and they're not involved. And that's really, really good from engagement and from involvement with fans. It's not really, really good in terms of league presentation. Take more care with that presentation. Don't rush it. Be honest, be transparent. What's happening with injuries? We still don't know that. I asked the league. They said they're working on something about revealing who's injured, who's not. They've not done that. Some people still don't even know that Steven Landers was supposed to play for the RAF on the second night, because they kind of glazed over that really quickly. And then more support from ESPN. So far they seem to have been great, but I just want them to give SlamBall more opportunities to shine, because it could shine. It just needs that chance. And then Miko's got a conspiracy-based follow-up. So again, at After Dark Miko on Twitter, more conspiracy-based follow-up. Do they want it to be a legit sport? Or is this nothing more than a quick merch drop and cash grab? I think from ESPN's standpoint, I have no idea. I think it's a content move. From SlamBall as a league, they absolutely want this to work. If this was a cash grab, Mason Gordon, the originator, wouldn't have been working to make SlamBall work in some capacity with so many different ways of facilitating that and so many different iterations for it. He wouldn't have been working more than 20 years to make this happen if this was just a quick cash grab thing. This is a passion project from everyone involved. It is a passion project from the people on the outside, like me, like Coach Berikoff, like Craig Skistimis. It's a passion project from Mason Gordon and Rob Wilson, who are involved in a VP role, from Stanley Fletcher, who's also a VP, who's also a coach, who's a former player who's come back, like all the former players, like James Willis or Trevor Anderson, who have come back to coach, like the former players who are doing other things like LaMonica Garrett or Inches Jackson, who have come back to do commentary, from everyone who wants this thing to succeed, because it's such a community thing. They want it to be great. They want it to be a legitimate sport. They wouldn't have restructured the league to feel more sporting if they just wanted it to be highlights, right? And that's always been the case, so I'm told, right? And that's the thing. They do. This is supposed to be a legit sport. And if we only get 2 years of it, I'm happy to be the number one analyst right now for 2 years. I would love to stay in this position, but I don't want competition, because I'm terrified of imposter syndrome and the idea that maybe I'm not that good at this, and if someone else comes along, they'll show me up. But I think I'm decent. I think I'm doing a decent job. I just want the league to have their own analysts, and I want ESPN to give them analysts. And for goodness sake, it's on ESPN Plus. That is a resource that means that there's an infinite possibility of programming. So just give them like a small set and have like breakdowns after the games. It doesn't need to be as tied in as like Inside the NBA, but you could have a little show that's like SlamBall Plus, and it's LaMonica Garrett zooming in from wherever he is, talking about the game with John Schriffen, right? That could be it, and that would be enough to have punditry and analysis. So do that. And then our last question for the Q&A, at SlamBall Network on Twitter asks, are my Lava going to put it together and get some wins this week? Maybe. The Lava are a lot better than their 0-2 record would suggest. Of the teams with a minus point differential, theirs is -8, which is the only single-digit one. And both of their losses came down to the wire and some unfortunate play calling on their part to try and make Greg Helt save them with 4-point shooting, which is a really tough position to be in when you're a guy that's not starting for this team because they don't like your decision-making, right? And if they could run a better play for the guy, maybe they've got a shot off, but it's a hard thing to do. So maybe they'll get a win. They've got the Griffins tonight. We'll talk about that later. Griffins are a tough team, but Lava and Griffs has been set up so that someone's got a win. And then they've got the Buzzsaw on Saturday. The Buzz are the second best team in the league, but the Lava are better than expected, or better than advertised with the 0-2. So by the time that game on Saturday comes around, maybe the teams will feel more even with the scoreline. Regardless, the Buzz will have been playing on Friday night, so I don't know, 2 days after exercise is usually when it hurts more, right? We'll see. The Lava could get some wins. To me, they're definitely better than the results would indicate. The problem is SlamBall sees that too, and what they're doing week to week, because some people are like, why isn't the schedule out? You know, we've only got times and locations, we've not got matchups. And I was curious about that too. Basically, the league doesn't decide what the matchups are going to be until the week of, because this is another parity play, right? They want all the teams to feel balanced and have an opportunity to win the whole championship. So they will structure week-to-week games based on who's winning and who's losing. And because the league sees a Lava as a top 4 team right now, they're playing the other top 4 teams, right? The Griffs are an exception, but they're playing the Buzz, and that's not an easy shift. And the reason for that is because they see the Lava as a good team, so they need to give them good opposition so that the less good teams can win against each other and move their way up the rankings. That's kind of what the structure of the schedule is. So Lava might get some wins, but it's going to be hard. I think if you're a Lava fan, tune into ESPN Plus on Saturday, because they're either going to beat the Buzz and then have a relatively easy main event matchup, or you're going to see how they can compete against best in the league. If you watch them tonight, watch them on ESPN2 tonight. The Griffs game should be good. The game against the Mob in the main event, which I'm just presuming is what's going to happen, would be bad. So, yeah. That is our Q&A, as I need to drink liquid. Those are all the Q&A questions. I don't think I'll do that next week. I'll find something else to do for our Thursday episode next week. But I just wanted to address any concerns people had about the league after week 1. Things they maybe didn't understand, things they maybe understand a little bit better now. That's what I wanted to talk about. We're now going to go to a short interview with Tony Feudo from OddsJam. Like I said, we're going to talk about his perspective as a fan, because it's just great getting to talk to someone about SlamBall. And then also betting realities for the league at the moment and where things sit. We'll be right back with a preview of tonight's games after this conversation with Tony. Welcome back to Bounce Off, everyone. We are joined again by Tony Feudo of OddsJam, here to talk about the first weekend's action of SlamBall and how that has affected the world of gambling. But first of all, Tony, as a fan of the sport, how did you find weekend one?
It was awesome, man. SlamBall is definitely back. Just following it. I've tried to watch every game. I was at work, so there was a couple points where I had to tune out, but I went back, and when I went home, luckily on ESPN Plus, you can go back and watch full replays whenever you want of all the games. So I went back, watched all the games, and man, is the excitement on another level. It's different from the original days, I think. A lot more high-flying offense, a couple really low-scoring games as well. But I think it's just everybody still trying to learn the sport together. And I couldn't be more excited for week 2 coming up here.
What are your big takeaways? You said it's high flying. We've heard some people say it's not as exciting as it used to be. There's too much focus on strategy, or are you just enjoying it as a sport now rather than an entertainment property?
Yeah, so I think that last thing you said is what I'm more looking forward to, and I think that they'll kind of learn how to mesh the two better as the year goes on. But I'm looking more forward to the sport aspect of it. It was on Spike TV and it was recorded back in the days more as an entertainment property, like you said. But I think it should be a full-on sport. And the guys you've interviewed, I listened to your interview that came out today on Bounce Off, and these guys are taking this seriously. They want to make a career of this. They're not looking like themselves as TV stars. They're looking at themselves as athletes and as professional athletes and people that want to sign contracts once this league has owners and stuff like that. And I think that with that, I think the sport and showing scoreboards and showing standings is super important. We were all a little like after that first day, like, what was the score of that game again? I actually had to go back and on ESPN Plus and watch all the games again. And I actually just tweeted out and found pictures myself. And I don't do graphic design or anything, but I'm just going to keep doing it for all of us in the little SlamBall Twitter crew that we've got going on. There's a few good ones here. So I think with us growing the sport on the social media side with the admin as well and all of his jokes, I think we'll get there as a sport, and it will be very entertaining as well.
I offered the admin my copy of the rule book, but I've not had a DM yet, so I don't know what's happening there.
He is so funny.
It's great. It's great. I'm right because my brain's a mess with all the SlamBall I've been taking. Your team pick preseason was the Slashers, right?
Yeah.
How are we feeling after weekend one? You're sat, I think, you're 4th on my personal power rankings. I believe 5th on the league's rankings with a 1-2 record. How are you feeling about
that? Yeah. So they're pretty much right where they should be, I think. They were at plus 550 on Bovada, where I got them at, and they were at plus 500 on BetUS to start off the year. So that was pretty much right in the middle there. The Mob was at plus 300, and at the bottom was the Wrath, actually, at plus 800 at one book at BetUS.
I'm 50-50 because I'm eating crow when it comes to the Mob because I had them at 7th and they've totally surprised me. But the Wrath are the only team I've predicted perfectly as being 3rd in the league, and that's pretty much where they are from everyone's rankings.
Right. So I think obviously I've got some stats here for that would help out gambling purposes, as well as just looking at how the teams have played, maybe not by record. And it's interesting. I mean, the Mob obviously have dominated at 4-0, but if you look on the SlamBall website, they've got a glossary at the bottom of their standings, and they've got PFGA and PAGA, which I think are the two most important stats in SlamBall. And that's your points for divided by your games played. So pretty much your points per game average, and then your points against divided by your games played, which is your defensive points per game. And the Mob are first in both categories at 64 points scored a game and 35 on defense. So they're just dominating completely. But an interesting thing to look at for the points scored per game is that the Lava at 0-2 are at the second highest points scored per game at 60. But if you look at the defensive points against per game, it goes Mob, Buzzsaw, and then the Griffins actually, but then the Rats. So the top three teams in the league standing wise are the best defensive teams as of right now.
Right.
So I know we mentioned at the beginning of the season that defense will probably win championships like it does in most sports. But I still think that the points will definitely come in bunches. But those defensive teams will definitely stick together and go the longest, I think.
Yeah, it's definitely a balancing act because most people are looking at the Mobs games and they're going, wow, they're running away with it scoring wise. They're averaging 64.5 points per game when other teams are barely making 30. And they're going, wow, they must be an offensive powerhouse. But then you look at Gage Smith defensively, you look at what they're doing on the perimeter, and it certainly does seem like, well, you want to bet the under on whatever score the opposition for the Mob's going to have on any given night.
Absolutely, and that's a great thing that you bring up because their defense is just dominating, and you want to probably take the over on their points,
yeah,
and the under on the other team's points, just because of how big the discrepancy is in the way they've been playing. But I think that'll change.
Yeah, with the target on their back now, do you think that's going to flip how they're playing, or even how other teams are playing against them, and how that's going to impact their point scores and the spreads and all this sort of stuff?
Yeah, man, I know it's been 4 games, but only some teams have played 2, and it's week 1 in a brand new league. I think the Mob are the best team, and they would be my new champion pick if you gave me a redo. And if we're going to do a little weekly or every other week update on my new champion pick, I would take I would take the Mob right now.
Every week you're gonna have a different jersey on underneath your OddsJam's shirt.
Yeah.
This is gonna be bomb. We're here.
Yeah. But no, I still think the Slashers are a great team, and they'll be right there too. I'm still not. I put money down at plus 550, so I'm still sitting on that, and I think that could definitely hit. But after week 1 of a new sport, I think anything can happen. The Mob could drop 2 games this weekend, and a team could win 3 or 4. And hey, we're right back pretty much at the beginning of the season again. So I think that the teams will get better. Some will get worse. The Mob should stay up at the top for most of it, but they'll definitely, with the target on their back, get everybody's best shot at them, I think.
With that as well, and I'm interested in how that's going to affect odd setting and lines and whatnot, but the way that the league is structuring games on a weekly basis is that they're not announcing the games until week of. And the reason for that is because week to week, they're structuring who plays who based on who the good teams are and who the bad teams are. Again, like everything they've done so far to create a sense of parity. So if you look at the Mob and the Buzz, who are probably the best teams so far, Buzz obviously losing to the Mob on Sunday night, but holding them to their lowest score thus far. Yeah. Those two teams are matching up against other teams in the top 5 of the league this weekend. Every game they've got scheduled, not including main event potential matchups, all the games they've got scheduled are top 4, top 5 teams. They're coming up against strong competition. Do you think that's going to change how odds are set for championship wins or anything regarding this league?
Yeah, that makes it tough, and it makes it a little bit less of that real sport aspect, I think. I think in the future, once we learn who more of these players are and teams are and organizations are, we should be getting a schedule out at the beginning of the season. That would be nice. Just like any other sport. Like, hey, week 1, we know the Mob are playing the Buzz. Then we know again in week 4, it's going to be a rematch. Just stuff like that. But I think right now it's good that we've got that just set up just so we can figure out kind of who's good and keep that entertainment value there, because to be honest with you, no one really wants to watch a 70-30 game. Yeah. I mean, those games are fun. Like that second game of SlamBall this season was a 3 or 4 point game. The second one of all time, which was awesome. So we definitely want to see more of that. It does kind of take away the betting aspect for sure, though, and makes it really tough because you can't kind of handicap the future ahead of time. So these lines will be coming out kind of last minute. But if you think about it, in the NFL, on a Sunday night is when they come out for the next week after the games anyway. So if that were to be the case, and I mean, Circa Sports is a sponsor of this league. Like, what are you doing, guys? Let's get some odds up on the website here. We love you, Jeff Benson, and everyone over there at Circa. But we should be getting those odds out at the beginning of the week to let us bet on it throughout the week, which will change those lines. that's the only way that we'll get it engaged. We can't get the lines out on a Wednesday or a Thursday. It'll limit the amount of people that can get in on the action, and it's just not the best way to do it, in my opinion, to grow the sport.
I think that's really difficult, especially when from an internal element, it's not just that the league's taking a while to set who's playing who. They are, because they're having to decide what teams are best matched up. But they then need to go to ESPN and get confirmation of, are these matchups okay for the coming week? How do we feel about this? So there's a level of management in between all of these steps that would make it harder to get it out to bookmakers.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And I think as the league grows throughout maybe next year or the year after, like I said, they'll have contracts with ESPN, and we'll know who people buy the jerseys of, who people gamble the money on. Hey, let's put the mob on Friday nights against the Wrath or something like that, and then we can do the Sunday afternoon, maybe the Rumble against the Lava or something like that. But just throwing out teams, for example. But I think SlamBall should, for entertainment purposes, a sport purpose, and gambling purposes, release their schedule at the beginning of every season, like every other league does.
Okay. In terms of your personal predictions thus far, we touched on your prediction for championship win, but every other prediction we touched on preseason has come good for you. How do you feel about that? Do you feel like a betting god, or what, or is it just the sport's been really easy to assess?
Both. So it was awesome this weekend. I mean, just seeing these scores, and I was just ticking them off and looking in my account on BetUS and Bovada, and just ticking them off and getting these wins. So we hit over 100.5 at -130, which was the highest game total. So that hit easily. We've had most games go over 100 now. We hit over 63.5 at -110, which was the highest score for one team. We hit the under 33.5 at -105, which was the lowest score for one team.
A tough game. 23 points for one of the teams this past weekend. Tough.
Brutal. And then we hit the under 74.5 at -110 for the lowest game total. So as we're going over this, and the first time I talked to you, we were saying, well, two teams are definitely going to go high flying. Let's take that over 100.5. I think it could be 51 to 50 easily, or something like that.
Yeah.
And then that means one of those teams probably in one of those games might score over 63 points. So we'll take that. So we took the over on both the game total and the score. So that kind of knocked each other out right there. And we didn't hit the lowest game total until the last day, I believe. But the lowest score for one team, I believe my quote was, every team is about to throw up a stinker every once in a while. So that was kind of an easy bet for me to place as well. I went the extreme on taking the overs and the extreme on taking the unders. And I've never bet on a league in its first week like this, but I've definitely never gone 4 for 4 and won every bet. So betting God, sure. But also, it was just fun. I think the lines were a bit easy for people that did follow it back in the day, like myself, and did follow the new athletes and stuff like you. So I think it was a couple easy picks there. But also SlamBall.com had their pick'em, where they had a bunch of picks for the money line winner, which is
you're dominating that too right now.
I'm number 2 in the whole website right now, behind a guy named Spreadsheet. So I don't even know if that's just them picking all the right games themselves or something like that. But that's fun for people that can't get on sportsbooks right now, which is pretty much everybody, because SlamBall's shut down all the odds now that the season started on BetUS. But SlamBall Pick'em right now, there you can pick the winner for every game, and you can also pick like the highest score, over unders, stats like that. So we're rolling right now on the betting aspect of SlamBall, and we're going to keep going.
So you just said they shut down all the odds on BetUS. Explain that to me, because to me that means, oh wait, so they've said no more betting, or what? What do you mean by that?
Oh no, so once the season started, you can't bet those numbers anymore.
Right. Okay.
So yeah, now that the games have started, the mob definitely aren't at +300. I bet they'd be more closer to -250, -300, which means you have to put down 300 to win 100,
right, okay,
instead of the other way around, or put down 30 to win 10.
Yeah.
So I think the the odds will definitely change once these sports books adjust to the new records and points scored per game and points against per game and all of the stats. I think they're going to eventually. I think that's what this needed, is all these updates on the stats and everything like that for them to actually be able to make a line and make it realistic, because this over 100.5, that hit by a breeze. The under 33.5, that hit by a breeze. Teams have scored over 70 points for the first time, and that line was set at 63.5.
Mm-hmm.
And then the under 74.5 for the lowest game total. I mean, those two teams just played terrible that game.
Yeah, that was
so
a bad Sunday.
Yeah, so I just think that will totally adjust the lines. But yeah, if you search SlamBall odds on Google on BetUS, it's there. You can't even see the preseason futures anymore. Right. So I've got them screenshotted on my Twitter there, and posted a lot about them. Same with Bovada; they don't have anything posted under SlamBall anymore. So
you're referencing BetUS and Bovada a lot, and that's because I was seeing you. I shouted you out on Twitter because someone was asking about the betting lines, and I said, "This is your expert to talk to," and you said that none of the big houses have jumped onto the sport yet. Why do you think that is? Is it just we're still so early into the new season, or what's the issue there?
Yeah, so I think they're just collecting data so they don't lose money. Because I believe BetUS and Bovada did lose probably a lot of money on those props. I think they were only on BetUS actually. They weren't on Bovada, okay. But BetUS had all of those props, and they were the only book in the world that I saw that had any of those props up. And Circus Sports, like I said, is a sponsor. I'm sure they were in the building this week collecting data, watching the games, getting the lot down. But the biggest sports books in America right now are FanDuel, DraftKings, Caesars, which has a casino in Vegas. And Wynn, who has a casino in Vegas, the Super Bowl. I mean, the Vegas Strip is where sports gambling was born, and where it still lives the most. So I think once one or two of these major sports books come out with some lines, then other books will jump off of those lines, and then we will start as the betting public and the sharps throwing our 2 cents in on this and this, and that'll adjust the sportsbook prices there. But yeah, I think they just didn't want to lose money in the first week, so they're just waiting to collect actually some game data, since there was absolutely zero with this new league and rules.
So focusing on those two that we talked about, BetUS having the spreads and whatnot, and Bovada having championship likelihood, have either of those updated the rates, or is it they're still catching up themselves?
Yeah, no, if you search it, they've shut it down. There's nothing there. It says there's 0 events, which is unfortunate because I check every single day. And I know there won't be game odds until there's actually game is released. So until we actually see what teams are playing. But I had figured that since BetUS and Bovada had put it out before the season, I'd figured that they would adjust at least the future odds there. But there's nothing online right now at all, which is it's pretty sad to see, because it blew up over the weekend all over social media, and I think we're off to a great start here.
Absolutely. I mean, and the schedule is out for this coming weekend, so if anyone's listening in from one of these houses, you absolutely need to start looking at that. As we finish off here, we talked about your team being the Slashers. This isn't necessarily a betting related question. This is just a fan related question. How are you feeling about their rivalry against the Mob? It seems to be the second biggest in the league. Are you nervous about that?
Any rivalry is a good rivalry, so I'll take it. And that means that if the Slashers beat the Mob, it's just that much more of an important win on their schedule, and will just boost up their odds even more. So I think right now is a good time to buy in on the Slashers, because if they do beat the Mob a couple times this season and get their number, you could see those odds get a lot different than what we got them at preseason too. So I'm just a fan of the sport. I love all the teams. I think it's been great so far. But yes, I did put a little pretty penny on those Slashers at plus 550 at Bovada before the season started. So I would like to see that bet turn green on Championship Sunday.
Perfect. Well, thank you very much, Tony, for joining us this evening and for giving us this update on all of the odds. We hope to talk to you more as the season progresses.
Awesome. Thank you, Sam.
Welcome back, everyone. Hopefully you enjoyed that conversation with Tony Feudo of OddsJam. I think he picked a good team with the Slashers. I've got a lot of confidence in them. No Slashers tonight, though. Our matchups are Lava versus Griffins. This is two teams that need a win. The phrase is someone's O has got to go, and in this case, it's the O for wins. Neither team's got a win on the board. I think the Lava are who I would pick in this situation. The Griffins are great defensively, the Lava are great offensively, but they've also got a top 5 stopper in the league at Faisal Shafat. Minimum top 5, maybe top 3. But the Griffs have their own in Connor Hollenbeck, so we'll see how this goes. Someone's got to win. My money's on the Lava. Ironic, given we just talked about betting. The other match tonight is Ozone versus Mob. The Ozone need to prove their spot to some people, including me. I don't know how good they are. They're 1-2 on the season thus far. I don't like their attitude. We've been over that earlier in the week. Keenan Love's great at stopper. Brian Bell Anderson's shown you nothing as the star player for this team. But they've got some stuff out of Keith McGee, obviously. The problem is some of these guys are shaking up. Who's playing, who's not, we shall wait and see. The Mob, 100% healthy. No issues with them. After weekend 1, picking against them is insanity, so I think the Mob are probably going to win. They need to go up against the best competition regularly, and if the league thinks the Ozone are better than advertised, then this makes sense. I also think it's good to structure upcoming games so that the Mob are always playing the second game, so that they're a little bit more tired going into the main event. If we're talking about parity in the league and a way of making it so that every team feels that they could win on any given night, if the Mob are winning and then having to play 15 minutes later, then that's a good thing for parity. Not a great thing for the Mob, but a good thing for parity. A good thing for us, everyone. Oh, main event matchup, Mob versus Lava. I've got to take the Mob as well. That doesn't need an explanation. Lava, I think, should get there, but the Mob are just too good for any team to compete against. But they've not played the Lava yet, and maybe the physicality is a good balance. That has been our episode, everyone. I'm really excited tonight. A lucky good thing for us is that tonight's matchups are on ESPN2. Bounce Off will obviously be back tomorrow with a review of how everything went down. I'm excited to talk some SlamBall with y'all. Yeah, and then everything else this weekend's on ESPN+. Hopefully you checked out that interview with Craig Skistimus earlier, checked out the one with Darian Slade from a couple of days ago, checked out the one with Coach Berkoff as well, and hopefully I'll see you for all the previews. Again, let me know how you're feeling about the league in the comments. Talk to me on Twitter or on any social media at Quantum Roberts, QUANTUM Roberts, and we can talk SlamBall. Give us some ratings and reviews on whatever podcasting apps you're using. Let me know how the podcast sounds. Let me know how this production sound or feels here. I'm really enjoying creating content on SlamBall, and hopefully you guys are really enjoying watching it. So have a wonderful day, everyone. Enjoy these games. Let's go Mob, I guess. I think Mob are the team I like. No, Wrath are still my team. That's all the blue. This is technically a purple shirt. Shout out Jason Williams, who's on my t-shirt right now. But I've talked too much. Let's get, games are coming up. Let's go. Let's get ready. Let's SlamBall. Nice.